Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, July 25th, 2025, and today we are talking about Neighbors, the agency that used to conserve ecology like it was their job, because, okay, technically it was their job, and it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right, happy Friday, everyone. I hope you all are doing well, harvesting away, getting ready for the big weekend of whatever big weekends are in your world. We have to set up the soccer fields, which is always a giant ordeal heading into the season, but also a lot of fun. I'll be watching some soccer as well, no doubt. I always do that. But also, I hope to get out and get some good bird photos around the garden right now because there have just been lots of good birds around. I'm likewise saying that aloud so that you can hold me to it on Monday because the goldfinches have been absolutely abundant lately, and I'd love to get some shots of those. Any bird that flies like a dolphin, it's good in my book. Anyway, it's Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about, is there such a thing as a small farm culture, or what that culture would look like, and some good comments there. I mentioned something to the effect of small farmers giving off the vibe of physical labor and pressure, and at Gail Bills 803 wrote, quote, small farms give off the vibe of determination and self-sufficiency and providing for their community. They are part of a greater movement towards decentralized production, just like decentralized local energy production, end quote. Fair. I think there are decentralized and centralized ways to farm, but in that vein, I mentioned the show The Bear as well as a decent representation of what kitchen culture was like, and asked what the small farming version of that show would be like. At Sylvia Denham 2343 offered, quote, Yellowstone, except it's a bunch of high tunnels on an acre of two. Of course, making it dramatic is a stretch. If you depicted the reality of shovel digging red potatoes in the deep south June heat with yellow flies and mosquitoes swarming you, it's a bit more of a docudrama that should be in black and white and scored to music in a minor key. The efforts of usually one guy trying to guide nature into giving back calories. Failures are usually internalized and silent, while successes are usually mild looks of restrained satisfaction while grazing over a garden, end quote. Great stuff. But if I may, I think it would be maybe less Yellowstone-y action-style drama and more clever dialogue-driven, like Sports Night. But I agree, the amount of actual action would be tough because there's not a lot of said action save for the occasional storm. But the amount of psychological and social complexities, spats between workers, neighbors, injuries, customers, all of that is ripe for dramatization, in my opinion. Could be fun, or it could be incredibly boring, except for those of us who are kind of in the business. We love it. On Tuesday, we discussed changing the pH of water and had several comments about high pH water and amending stuff. A couple people recommended lowering pH through filtration. At Splitting Giblets wrote, quote, pH of 7.5 to 8 is considered perfectly acceptable from a water quality standard perspective. In Arizona, we don't consider it an exceedance until you go above 9 for high pH. Your state may vary, end quote. Also, as at the Burnham's 2925 noted, direct induction of acids into a water source is tricky. Yeah, tricky. I mean, all of this stuff is tricky. For instance, something that came up a few times was that sulfur takes a long time to change the pH, but that isn't necessarily true. It depends on if you were using pellets or powder. It depends on the time of year that you put those onto your soil or into your soil, the health of your soil at that moment, in terms of like the microbiology able to, render those nutrients available to plants, the moisture, the temperature. This is why I tend to stay out of soil chemistry conversations or recommendations too much, because they are so contextual and one nutrient addition can affect the availability of another nutrient in the soil. I will admit that I perhaps played a little bit too safe sometimes with my recommendations on this stuff, but so much of soil management is very simple to me. Set the gardens up well with the help of a good agronomist. Employ good water delivery to the garden beds. Disturb the soil as little as possible. Good soil coverage. Keep plants growing. Boost local ecology around the garden. Use healthy compost, and a vast majority of your issues will be managed that way. As you get into higher and higher levels of execution and production and dial in your systems, then you really need to turn to an agronomist to really maximize every square inch. That's how I look at it, at least. On Wednesday, we had our first Growers Daily live episode and got really great feedback from that. I was surprised, given the time of day that we put it up, at the number of you who were able to make it. So thank you for that. Someone suggested we do one of those per week, and that would be a lot, but maybe a couple times per month we could do something like that. I would also love to eventually do remotes and vaguely plan to do some of those this winter, recording a sort of live show on location. Nothing set in stone, but I will let you all know soon enough if one of those comes about. Those live shows, like the one that I did on Wednesday, is on some profound amount of talking. So, a dude needs a little recovery time after one of those. We got lots of congrats on it being our 200th episode too, which is very cool. Thank you all. This show is so much work, but it is also a lot of fun. It's a great challenge for me. I've learned a ton through it, and I hope you all have enjoyed it. I also thought I would take a second to answer a comment that came on that video from @Maria Ishtar, who wrote, quote, "I'm a small farmer from Amity, Oregon, and I am planning to plant high volume garlic for 2026. Please make a video all about garlic. What is the best way of planting in the no-till method? How to find a buyer? Is there any coup? Anything you think I should consider?" End quote. Thanks. And when I read this, I was convinced I had actually already done a whole video on garlic, but it turns out that I haven't done like a specific sort of old school style Farmer Jesse video on garlic as I thought I had. I just talked about it a lot on this show and other various places without ever actually doing, just like a full start to finish garlic episode or video or whatever. So I will try to fix that this fall as we head into garlic planting and prepping season. Finding a buyer can be tough, but I would start work on that now before you plant any garlic, because having a bunch of extra garlic is also a lot to deal with. Check in with some restaurants you like, especially if you have samples currently from this season. Check in with some retailers to see if they have a good, reliable supplier. Salsa producers, spice producers. Maybe there's a soup maker or a naturopath or something that maybe somebody you could supply. Before you've grown the crop, it may be hard to get a guaranteed buyer, but if you have even a small sample from this year, that will make a huge difference in being able to kind of get your foot in the door. Anyway, yeah, more on garlic over time. We have grown not enough at times and too much at other times and everything in between. So plenty of thoughts there. Then on Thursday, we discussed if corn was a heavy feeder and starting a small farm business, and @Rachel Thomas on 1281 Thomas son asked if there were farm business books we recommend. And there are several out there, but the one I always tell small farmers to pick up is the Organic Farmer's Business Handbook, a complete guide to managing finances, crops, and staff, and making a profit by Richard Wiswall. This book is just legendary. It's the best. I think every farmer should just at least start there. Also look into Dan Brisebois' Spreadsheet Academy to dial in your spreadsheets. He's a farmer, so his advice can help with both business and crop planning stuff. You'll find that a lot of other farmers look outside of the realm of farming for inspiration and get advice in the from the business world. As you get more experience, you will be able to adapt general business advice to what we do on farms. It isn't altogether different, right? There's a cost of production, there is the price of the sale, and then there is figuring out what your net profit is and how to maximize that. That all applies to basically any business. Also that day on the corn is a heavy feeder front, I discussed the Three Sisters / Milpa gardening styles quite extensively in terms of how corn was bred to be grown versus how it is commonly grown. @GCC2313 noted, quote, "I think a big issue with corn specifically is that corn is in way higher demand than most crops. Even if we could do Three Sisters and other growing methods, you'd be left with less corn and more of the other crops like squash that have lower demand. I'm not sure what the best ecological option would be that still maintains reasonable yield, but I guess cover crops may be the next alternative," end quote. And cover crops I think are an important factor in all this, and it certainly helps to break up the, crop rotation, so to speak, and at least add some diversity to a corn planting. And yeah, corn is definitely more in demand, but squash is underrated in its potential as well. I found a Brazilian study, for instance, that looked at squash seed meal as an alternative to soybeans and found, quote, "The inclusion of squash seed meal at different rates in broiler diets," that's chickens, "partially replacing soybean meal and vegetable oil improved live performance and edible portions yield. In addition, abdominal fat and serum levels of harmful lipids were reduced, whereas serum levels of beneficial lipids increased. There was no effect on meat sensory quality," end quote. So effectively, the squash seed meal improved the quality to some extent, and maybe there could be a whole host of opportunities to diversify livestock feed ingredients, among other things, with more squash. Harvesting it out of the corn, well, that would be a whole other challenge, but there is some use for it, some potential there. All right, great week of input as always. Also, lots of love for the 20-second video clips that you all have been sending to Mike, which you send to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Feel free to do that at any time. This week was all about showing us your harvest, so feel free to send those in still. Next week, maybe we'll give you a different prompt. I don't know what it'll be. We'll see. I love these videos because I often haven't seen them until Mike has me review the final edit. So they are always a delightful surprise for me. And I've loved seeing your farms and gardens. And I also, very cool to see that so many flower farmers follow us. Who knew? I guess we need a little bit more flower content for you all. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get neighborly. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe. But what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Does this show bring you $2 worth of value every month? $5? Maybe 10? You can sign up there to show your support and appreciate it. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Lee Kossip, who writes, quote, "Hello, I just rewatched an episode from last October where you discussed the importance of neighbors. It's been a theme coming up for me everywhere lately. The algorithm popped this short doc from Campfire Stories up for me called Radical Neighboring, and Lee posts a link that I will share in the show notes to an interesting video about kind of a person who sort of effectively tries to imagine a life not being a consumer. Anyway, Lee continues, "It really got me in the feels. I know we can't all do this, but just incorporating conscious neighborly acts as best we can. Not really a question, but would love an episode that compiles farm/neighbor stories/experiences if you feel that fits in your scope, of course. Thanks for being awesome." End quote. Okay, thank you for being awesome, Lee. That's a fun prompt. And I think that Patreon members should always feel free to just add topics and prompts like this to the Patreon page. Love it when I can just take one of those and talk about the subject, especially something as near and dear to my heart as neighbors, because absolutely that is within the scope of what we do. Neighbors and neighborliness are an enormous part of farming. I've actually, at this point, done a few segments, I think, related to neighbors, and I will link at least a couple of those in the show notes, including the one that Lee mentioned. The one on country currency, reciprocity, got a lot of attention back when I discussed that one in January, and that is, frankly, one of my favorite cultural activities to engage in, where neighbors are constantly not just bartering, but often exchanging things to a point of being, somewhat indebted in non-monetary ways to your neighbors, almost like a game, but also something way more important than a game. A story that sort of stands out in that vein about, sort of neighborliness in this way, this sort of reciprocity, actually comes from a friend of mine who had really great neighbors who would come and help them and bring things to them often, tools that they may have needed, as is pretty common in the rural world. They would do some tractor work for them, maybe like plow a field if need be, or help with animals or whatever they needed. And then one day, if I remember his story correctly, one of those neighbors showed up while my friend was, I think, harvesting, like it was like a harvest day or something. This neighbor was older and less capable and asked if my friend could help them with some work. I want to say it was just putting up hay or something, or maybe, I don't know, helping them gather some straw or I don't know, but I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember that my friend told me he couldn't do it because he was busy. So that's what he told his neighbor. And I think the neighbor left and it was fine and never brought it up again. But, neighbors will do a lot for you without asking for anything in return. They may never ask for anything in return, but the value of reciprocity is that they feel they can ask for something if they absolutely need it. Not a collection on debt exactly. It's sweeter and more sincere than that. It's more like paying it forward, where the neighbor helps you, never knowing if they will ever need you to help them. To be clear, people rarely ask for help in the country. They're not likely to go out of their way to just say, I need something from you. When they do it, it means they need it. And I know that my farmer friend has long regretted not going to help that neighbor in that moment. It probably wouldn't have taken that long. It would have meant a lot to that neighbor. That neighbor, also being a farmer, would have likewise understood what it was costing my friend to abandon the harvest in that moment. In other words, they knew what they were asking was a big ask, and they hoped they'd gained enough credit to ask that favor. By turning them down, my friend inadvertently was kind of saying no to that, and I think has always regretted that. I think about that story a lot. I think about what it means to ask for help and what it means to help others, even or especially when you yourself are busy. Neighbors can do a lot for you. We've had neighbors plow plots for us, mow fields, fix vehicles, even once had to ask them to watch our kids when we couldn't make it back to town in time. And then we always try to do as much as we can for them, watching their house or animals or when they're gone, or helping with various projects or chores that they may be working on, whatever we can. No doubt a bad neighbor can cause a lot of stress and frustration, but there's just absolutely nothing like a good neighbor. And honestly, there are a few things more important than striving to be a good neighbor yourself. We've been lucky with neighbors, and to me, I hope our neighbors will say the same about us one day. Anyway, love this topic, and I will take any and all thoughts and stories on neighborliness and reciprocity. I know, to be sure, not all neighbors' stories are good stories, like I mentioned, but there are plenty of great experiences out there too that are perhaps too subtle to really ever talk about, but fit into this idea of reciprocity. Feel free to share those in the comment section. I think it's good for people to see that. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, how about one of those cool, big ecological ideas we talked about earlier this week that I never actually got to? Be right back.
I'm Christina. I'm an American living on the south coast of England. This is my allotment, which is a community garden. I've gardened here for 11 years, the last 7 of which have been no-till.
Hi Jesse, this is Stacy with Gooseberry Bridge Farm in Rogersville, Missouri. I grow about a 4,000-ish square foot garden for my family of 8, and also about a half acre of cut flowers, primarily for you pick, and this is my harvest from this morning. Cucumbers, tomatoes, eggplant, zucchini, and lots of beans.
All right, so over the last couple of weeks, I have asked for different large-scale ecological projects that you all have come across that you think are really interesting. And last week, at Laura Brown 5307 wrote, quote, "Maybe we need to bring back the Civilian Conservation Corps," end quote. And that is an interesting idea. All right, so what is the Civilian Conservation Corps, and should we indeed bring it back? So the Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC, was an organization started by Franklin D. Roosevelt that lasted from 1933 to 1942. Quoting the U.S. Forest Service here, quote, "The CCC was designed to provide employment for young men in relief families who had difficulty finding jobs during the Great Depression, while at the same time implementing a general natural resource conservation program in every state and territory. Men enrolled in the CCC planted over 2 billion trees, built over 125,000 miles of roads and trails, constructed over 6 million erosion control structures, and spent 6 million workdays fighting forest fires. No women were ever enrolled in the CCC," end quote, which no women is probably why they didn't accomplish more. Zing! Shouts to my ladies from the 1930s. Anyway, the CCC ended primarily due to America's entry into World War II, and it never really returned as a federal program. There are still programs out there that echo that work a little bit. According to corenetwork.org, quote, "Unlike the CCC, which was a large federal program, most modern corps are nonprofits or are operated by units of state or local government," end quote. AmeriCorps is also a big funder of these various corps. Corps is a really hard word to read because it looks like crops, but just kind of like somebody screwed it up. Anyway, not all corps are restoration or conservation corps, but those do still exist. The California Conservation Corps, for instance, is one that does things like managing for mudslides and toxic contamination after fires or floods or whatever, preventing fires, managing invasive species. In fact, several of these various corps throughout the country will do invasive species management, fire management, including prescribed burns, tree and native plantings, and so on. Honestly, looking through some of these programs, I'm a little bummed I didn't know that they really existed to this extent when I was in my late teens or early 20s, which is the target age group for most of these programs. The goal is generally to engage and train younger adults and even youth. But I can also tell these funds are not always the most well-funded. Not to mention USDA conservation funds and staff are currently being slashed. But it's cool that although the CCC is gone, there are still a fair number of these conservation programs around where people can get paid to help improve and manage the environment. I would love to see that grow to be a federal program again, not unlike the National Guard or whatever. A group that is just trained in restoration and deployed en masse to improve and protect landscapes, waterways, all the things, especially on public lands, to plant trees and natives, building hiking trails, pushing back on desertification, constructing bridges over roadways for wildlife, implementing more prescribed burns, working to simply protect the land, the soil, the water, the air. We all share all of those things. A National Soil Guard, perhaps, an army for our land. We won't, of course, create anything like that because we seemingly can't spend money on anything unless it gives tax breaks to wealthy people and large corporations, but I like the idea. Yeah, bring back the CCC. Anyway, I hope you all have great soccer and farming-filled weekends. It will be too hot for us to do much of anything except protect plants, but that's just how it goes in summer sometimes. Heat domes, good stuff. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Would you find out with me? Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, which is like almost over, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Patrick Weaver. Shouts to Patrick Weaver. All right, so you will remember from this week's story, our two farmers are on a trip through the most impressive forest they've ever seen, and they suddenly enter a clearing, and there's a whole population of people there working and living in small makeshift housing. Kids are playing a ball game that looks somewhere between soccer and croquet. The two farmers ask the mysterious customer, "What gives here?" And the mysterious customer takes a breath and then explains that he has been cultivating this group for over 50 years, buying land and effectively allowing them to tend the land and live off of it. Like you, he tells them, I've brought each of them back here to show them what we are building, and almost everyone stays to help. Building? What are you building? What exactly is that? The farmers ask. And the mysterious customer says, the future. You see, he says, we need people with skills to manage the land on this scale and improve it, live off of it, and live together. That's all this is, an investment in bringing back those skills. People are free to come and go as they please, but they rarely leave. I used to be a tech guy, he says, but you get to the point when you realize we already have all the tech we need. We've just forgotten how to use it. Of course they realize that's how they know him. He famously quit the industry at the peak of tech's rise. Those who do that tend to disappear into obscurity. This one, it seems, disappeared into the future. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you Monday. It seems like that's just a few days away. We'll just jump right back in. All right. Thanks, you all.